Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us again here on this weekly podcast where we try to bring you the best in conversation, the best minds, the best innovation. And more importantly for me in this podcast, this continuing to grow in this space. And that is this element of passion, drive, and purpose for the individuals that I'm talking to. It's just not people that are figured out one day that this was a good thing to do or a good piece of work to get involved in. A lot of folks that I talk to have been driven into this work through life circumstances, and that's no different from my guest today, Mr. Omari Maynard. I've heard about this brother, years and, it's not years and years, but years I've been hearing about him, had a chance to meet him in LA, and then I believe in Washington. We was there for something else, and just continue to hear his story and think his story is so important. But not only is the story important, but the subject matter itself about infant mortality, particularly as it affects Black women. And as we listen to the stories of Black men tell these stories, it's just important for people to understand that this is also part of the body of work of responsible fatherhood. Omari is my homie. And so he was born in Brooklyn. He's an artist. He uses color, dimension, and texture exhibits true, raw, and natural talent. The evolution of artistry is evident in his work. His pieces tell stories that are thought-provoking, intellectually inspiring, and technically sound. Omari's life partner, Shamony Gibson, transitioned in 2019 due to medical malpractice after giving birth to their second child. And in response, Omari co-founded ARIAH. Am I saying that right, bro? ARIAH? ARIAH. Okay, ARIAH Foundation. ARIAH utilizes art, education, and advocacy to migrate the long-lasting impact of systemic racism and oppression on the sexual, reproductive health and birth outcomes within the BIPOC communities. Omari, thank you so much, man, for coming on. How you doing this morning?
Man, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. Fatherhood is a beast. It is a beast. So, I haven't eaten yet. I was outside, so I've got these flowers that I was planting. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I've been on the flower game like dudes is on like the sneaker game, man, on the hunt for trying to find dope flowers. So I finally got them planted this morning. I took my kids out because they wanted to go see their friends, and this is all before, like I said, we started today. It's 10 o'clock now. I've been up and moving since about 5, 6, but it's par for the course.
Yeah, I would help you out, bro, but you can't transport vegetation from Africa to America, because I was just in a botanical garden in Ghana. And there was all kinds of things over there, man. I could have brought you back some. You would have had a dope garden, things that was growing right from the motherland. And I'm going back to Kenya. And so I'll be in Kenya in a few weeks. And if I can figure out how to get it to you, if I don't get you anything else, get you some seeds.
Man, listen, man, I'd be greatly appreciated, bro. That's amazing. That'd be amazing. Yeah, and I gotta go to Ghana with you too, man. We gotta set that up.
Absolutely. Now I'm going back next year. We'll talk about that offline, so I can tell you what we're going back for, because some of your work would also be incredibly impactful there. And then I'm also got this chance in front of me to possibly go to Nigeria. To do some literacy work with father engagement stuff in Nigeria as well. So we'll chat about that. Do me a favor and walk me through your journey. Walk me through start where you want to start and end where you want to end, because I think all of that is going to give me the meat for our conversation. I know where I want to go, but I want people to know you. I want them to know your story. Omari has been on today. He was covered by today's show. And so America knows his story, but now we want to bring it to you here on I Am Dad podcast. Omari, give us his story.
Yeah, most definitely. So, like you said, my partner, my life partner, Shamani Gibson, she passed away October 6, 2019. And 13 days after she gave birth to our second child. And between those 13 days, we were calling the hospital, let them know what was going on, telling them that she had shortness of breath. Shortness of breath, it was hard for her to talk, hard for her to move, hard for her to walk up and down the steps. These are all signs that, she could possibly have pulmonary embolism or just blood clots moving through her body. And we even actually told him that. The crazy part about our story is that our family has been rooted in the maternal health space for decades. Mm-hmm. Shamani's mother, she's a social worker, she's an advocate, she also has many different conferences that she holds. One is called the Motherhood Conference, where they get women together who have dealt with infant mortality, stillbirths, released pregnancies. So the community in itself, in which we've already cultivated and created, is essentially like community of midwives, doulas, doctors, nurses, people who are practitioners, people who are in the healthcare system. So we had that, community already to access, and we were accessing them, during these 13 days. The hospital that we gave birth at, we knew, like, we had a personal relationship with the head of the delivery and infant unit there. And we were giving her the time, telling her the symptoms, and she was telling us, Shamani, she needs to just, relax, lay up, don't do too much. And, honestly, that was probably the worst advice that we could have got, because if you, are having blood clots move through your system, the last thing you want to do is be still, because it gives them time to activate and move. Mm-hmm. You want to be moving around and doing things to get them to, release the fluid. So, essentially, that was her demise. If we everything was all good on October 5th. We were all in the house chilling, relaxing. Thankfully, her mom, her aunt, her godmother were over at the house with me and the kids as well. But she was complaining. She's like, yo, I have sharp chest pains. I want to go to the hospital. And as I'm packing the bag, her aunt and her mother just called me into the room screaming hysterically. And, Shamani goes into cardiac arrest right in the house. And called the ambulance, called the EMTs. Seemed like it took forever. But when they got there, the first question they were asking us was, was she on any drugs? Like, I remember the EMT worker getting frustrated because she wasn't staying still for him to take her vitals. And I'm like, essentially, she's fighting for her life, like literally fighting for her life. And you worried about her sitting still and being frustrated because she's not, So, man, I want to say during that moment of time, like specialists came in, another set of EMT workers, the fire department, and they all were asking the same questions, not what her vitals are, not how she's doing, not let's get her to the closest hospital, let's get her to a hospital that could be the most effective. It was, was she on any drugs? Is she taking any drugs? Let us know. It's okay. Is she on any drugs? And, and when we're talking about life or death situations, seconds, they all matter. She didn't get taken out the house until about, I want to say almost 20 minutes after she went into her first cardiac episode. Mm-hmm. And by the time, she was at the hospital that she went to, I was asking to get us to a different hospital. The closest hospital in my neighborhood has been divested from for years. And so that's another separate conversation on the demographics and the infrastructure of Bed-Stuy itself, in which, the property value and gentrification has created multi-million-dollar homes and all types of, coffee shops and residents that got to pay $2,500 for a studio apartment, but the school system is still trash. The healthcare system, the hospitals in the area, are still being divested from. They don't match. And when we got to the hospital, they didn't have the unit, they didn't have the and they didn't have the tools to treat blood clots properly. All they could do was give her blood thinners at that point, and we just waited. And honestly, at that point, even if she did come to and was able to breathe on her own so that we could get her to a hospital that could give her the help that she needed, she already was pretty much as good as brain dead. She already had there wasn't still already enough oxygen going to her brain, and unfortunately, 12 hours later, she passed away.
Mm.
And that is what exactly what you were talking about. To start off our podcast, like essentially, now I do a lot of work. Not even a lot of work. My life's mission at this point is to raise awareness around maternal health, maternal mortality, maternal morbidity, infant mortality, infant morbidity, systemic racism, social injustice, healthcare reform, all of these things, because essentially these are the things that are killing our women and destroying the Black family, amongst all the other hurdles that Black people have to go through and deal with and being, and living in America.
Yeah, that was where I kind of wanted to go. We're going to talk about the advocacy work, but I want to stay back in this space just for a moment because there's another aspect of this I want you to talk about. But if I didn't say in the beginning when I said that Omari was my homie, we talking about homies from Brooklyn, New York. And so when you talked about the divestment of hospitals, I was actually born in Jewish hospital up on Atlantic Avenue. I don't know if it's still there or not, but I was actually born in that hospital. But as a kid growing up, our neighborhood hospital was Kings County Hospital. And I was actually in the emergency room a couple of weeks ago for an asthmatic episode, which is why I used to always be in Kings County Hospital when I was a young kid. And I was having a conversation with the young lady, and she was talking about how chaotic the emergency room was that I was in. And I'm sitting there looking around. I'm like, what chaos? Like, you don't even understand what ER chaos looks like until you're in a hospital in Brooklyn, New York, particularly Kings County, where I grew up. I've been in that hospital, and when I've had an asthmatic episode and walked by people with gun wounds, knives still stuck in their chest. And I was telling her about this one story when I was really young. They pushed me by this guy, and he had a axe in his head, and they hadn't taken the axe out. They just had the bandage around his head. And and they're in a waiting room. They're not getting served. They're in the waiting room. That goes to tell you how much other bad stuff is going on behind the scenes, that a dude with an axe in his head can't get served until people in front of them get served. So when you talk about that New York and a lot of other major urban centered hospitals in cities around the country, that's what we're describing. And people don't understand what you're actually describing because they're thinking about a hospital from the context of their rural community or private community and their organization and stuff that's going on there. So I want to kind of touch on that. But what I want you to talk about, Omari, a little bit is as you're going through all this stuff, because this is important, I think, for people to hear, particularly for men to hear, like, what is your mental state going through this? Because I'm listening to you in parts of your story, and there's moments where I feel like I would have been concerned. Then there's other moments where I would have been agitated, and then other moments when I would have been annoyed, and then other moments when I would have been outraged, and other moments where I would have just fell apart. Talk to me about that roller coaster ride of you having to hold yourself together going through this thing for your wife.
Yeah. I say this often, like during that 12-hour period where, she first first went into cardiac arrest until she essentially, stopped breathing, and transitioned. It was, I mean, honestly, it was shock, and my emotional, like if my emotional bandwidth was like this, after those 12 hours, it became this, right? And I mean, I remember, man, I remember when the EMT workers were trying to get her to, sit still, and I'm trying to talk to her and, calm her down, and, it's going to be okay. We're here, let me help you. And she's fighting and she's fighting. And then she just stops fighting, and then that moment, I remember wanting to say, yo, I don't think she's breathing, but I couldn't, the words couldn't come out of my mouth because I didn't want to bring that into reality. And oh, man, and I'm like looking at the EMT work and I'm like, do you see what's going on? And he's like, yeah. And then they start, doing chest compressions and doing all the things. But at that moment, it shit got real. It got real, and it got real really fast, and I still, of course, had hope. I still, wasn't thinking the worst, but I knew at that point, it is like this is a moment to moment thing, and we gotta I've got to be present and not, and not think about what could be coming. Because if I went into that route, I would have lost it. I wouldn't have been sane. Honestly. So yeah, so fast forward, where we are in the ambulance, we're getting to the facility, and like I said, this hospital's been divested for years. Nobody really goes to this hospital because they already know what it is, once you get there. And I just remember there being like 10, it felt like 10 doctors and nurses just surrounding her, and everybody trying to input and impart their opinion on what's going on and what they should do and what needs to happen and what has to happen first. And we can't do this if we do that, or we can't do that unless we do this. And I remember one lady saying, yo, she is having a pulmonary embolism. We need to do X, Y, and Z. And everybody, all the other doctors still trying to say or do whatever they needed to do. But I really felt like, and it resonated with me because I felt like I'm a very big proponent on there being too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes, and I just feel like if we were in a different situation, she still could have possibly been here if there were less doctors trying to tell people what was needed to save my partner's life. And essentially, eventually, they were able to, of course, diagnose her and figure out what the next steps were. But at that point, it was too late. And then, it's another interesting story. So I was, before I quit my job, I didn't quit my job. I fired my job, honestly. I fired my job in 2020. I was a teacher. I was teaching algebra and geometry, and I was talking to one of the nurses at the hospital that Shamani ended up giving birth in. I'm talking to her, I'm telling her what I did. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a teacher. I teach at Midwood High School. And she's like, oh, yeah, my son goes to Midwood. It's like, oh, word, yeah, I teach geometry. Oh, my son's taking geometry. Turns out her son was in my class during that time. So me and her ended up kind of building and having a relationship. And this was where we were at. We had Kari at Woodhall. We had Kari at Woodhall Hospital. we took Shamani to Interfaith, which is on Atlantic as well, and we took her to Interfaith, and again, doctors, nurses arguing. Eventually, they, diagnose her, and I'm sitting in the chair. I'm like trying to figure it out, and I look up, and the same nurse whose son I taught also had shifts at Interfaith and was at Interfaith. And when I saw her, like I just felt relief in knowing that somebody knew our family, and I felt like could help because they were, we had an invested relationship, and I just remember going to see her, like seeing her and just hugging her and breaking down, and her trying to reassure me that everything was going to be okay and they were going to do the best that they could and she wasn't going to go anywhere, and all the things, man, and that helped. But it was just fucked up to have to even just be in that, be in that type of situation. And from that point, eventually they got her to a room, and we ended up taking over the hospital. I mean, there had to be at least 30, 40 people at the hospital, honestly, during that time. We were in different rooms. We were, in her room. We were in the hallway. And I was, by her side. And at that point, I felt hopeless. I mean, not hopeless, helpless. I couldn't do anything. I didn't have any expertise to provide. I couldn't, fucking give her my heart and keep it pumping. Like I couldn't do anything. All I could do was just be present and be there and sit with her and be by her side. And, that's what I did. And, I mean, during this time period, there's also things happening like that. Sometimes she's, breathing fine, and other times she's going in and they gotta, give her chest compressions and put her back on the ventilator. So, it was a lot of strain and stress, and but more than anything, it was reality, and it was me learning and figuring out in real time how to deal with this new reality. And I just remember, like, lastly, like her cousin is also a doctor, and she was actually the first person to get to the hospital after I did. So she was able to talk to them, and in the language that they understood, and give us all the terms and all the technical things and all of that stuff. So we knew exactly what was going on, and she knew exactly what to ask and figure that and all that stuff. And I remember just, we're about 8 hours in at that point, and I just remember just asking her, like, like, how is it realistic that she's gonna live? And she was like, I don't think so.
Wow.
We're gonna pray. And at that moment, it was, all right, I got to prepare myself for the worst. And, how do I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to, I think it's important to slow the story down sometimes, because I can, you could do these podcasts and kind of skip through and get to like all things. But for me knowing what you're trying to do on the advocacy side and know what I'm trying to do on the program delivery service side, like so often we can think that the stuff that we're doing is just statistical, right? We're doing it because there's a statistic that says that this is an issue, right?
Yeah.
This is more than a statistic, right? This is life. This is family. This is people. Right. And so when people don't know the story of what you're trying to do, they can gloss over the importance of paying attention to it. And that's why I want to slow this down, because I need people to sit in the story. I interviewed Iyanla Vanzant a few years ago when I did my first documentary, Spit and Anger, about fatherlessness, particularly in Black men and boys. And she said something to me, and it was like really weird when she said it, but I understood what she was trying to say. And she said, sometimes you got to sit in the hurt. right? Sometimes you got to sit in the hurt and marinate in it so that you fully and clearly understand what you're in the midst of. And she said, if more people would sit in the hurt as opposed to trying to heal so fast, they would actually heal faster if they allowed themselves to be absorbed by the circumstance that they were in. Now, this was your second child with your life partner. Did you know anything, or were you aware that you had to be conscious about the issues as it surrounds Black women and birth prior to that? Or was this like, whoa, what's going on? Like, I didn't know that I should have been mindful about this.
No, like I said, earlier, the crazy part is that, Shamani's family has been in this, the darker side of maternal health, and wrestling with it for decades. And so before Shamani passed, we had created a company called Artful Living. And Artful Living, it was a lifestyle brand, essentially, but we would do like sip and paints, murals, work with New York City parks, all type events to bring people together and use different artistic modalities to create community, essentially. And one of the things that we used to do for Shawnee's Motherhood conference work was create artwork around birthing, around healthcare issues and things of that nature. So I was privy to information. I've been in those spaces. I've heard the stories of women going through stillbirths or releasing pregnancies, or having to deliver, a baby who's not alive. Having to get a C-section for a baby who's not alive. Having to deal with the traumas that go with going into get into your third trimester and not being able to, having to release your child through miscarriage, so I've heard the stories, I knew the people, but I never thought that I would be on the other side of the coin, so it's like, I wasn't surprised by what was happening per se, but I was surprised that it was happening to us just because of the fact that we were invested and rooted in the same type of community.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew the signs, we knew the symptoms, we knew the language, we knew the people to talk to. We had the birth plan, we had a midwife, we had a doula for both of our children. I was at all of the OB visits. Everything we did essentially everything that we could to make sure that we were covered. And still, when we really come down to it, systemic racism is a beast, man, and nobody is safe, and that's just the honest truth.
Yeah. So let's educate people now, because we now know the story. And we know how pervasive this issue of Black maternal mortality is. Frame the issue for us. What is the issue? What should we have front of mind when we're thinking about this issue of Black maternal mortality?
Yeah. So, the numbers speak for themselves. So the numbers are essentially 700 to 900 women pass away every year due to maternal health complications. And, when we talk about maternal mortality, it's very prevalent, but honestly, maternal morbidity, the near-death experiences, you can almost, 3 to 5x that, for women who are, bringing new life into the world. 80% of these deaths are preventable. And 85% of these maternal mortality, maternal morbidity complications come from due to cesarean sections, C-sections. And the C-sections, the numbers for C-sections are crazy. 85% of C-sections are not even needed. So when we talk about C-sections and how commonplace it is for women to get it nowadays, we don't always realize, understand that it's major surgery. It's major surgery that's happening to women who can easily pass give their children, pass their children through the vaginal canal and give birth naturally. But because, we're dealing with the healthcare system and the business of healthcare, when we talk about the numbers, it takes about 45 minutes to have a C-section as opposed to 8 to 12 hours to have a vaginal birth. A vaginal birth, I think, is roughly around $12,000 to $15,000 that a hospital receives, as opposed to a cesarean section, which is about $22,000 to $30,000 that a hospital will receive. So now we're talking about double the payment and freaking more than half of the time, 45 minutes, and you can schedule it and you can plan it integrate it into the day, So when we look at those numbers, it's essentially the incentivization to practice on Black and brown bodies specifically. And the amount of money that passes through these hospitals in order to do them makes the numbers, makes it more clear why these issues are so prevalent. There's just so much money. And then once you have a C-section, 50%, probably even more than that, your child is probably going to have to go to NICU for some reason, right? And then when we talk about the NICU, if a child stays in the NICU for a day, that's $45,000, right? So if you have a child who's in the NICU for a week, that's $1 million baby right there. And that's what they call them, if they're in there for a week. So there's money, there's tons of money, and unfortunately, they are cutting our whipping open and making it so commonplace that our community thinks that C-sections is just the way to go, or birthing at a hospital is really the only option, but that's not the case. And honestly, if we created systems and where midwifery care, where there's the birthing team that's available, where doula care is something that is an active part of the delivery process, then these numbers would be way better than what they are. The United States is one of the worst countries to have a baby in, the worst industrialized countries to have a baby in the world. I want to say we rank like 26th when it comes to our maternal mortality statistics compared to other countries. And when we look at all the other countries who are doing their thing, whose maternal mortality issues are, in the less than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 percentiles, they have midwifery care and doulaship care integrated into every hospital. So when you go in there, you have somebody other than a doctor saying, hey, let me cut you open so you get this baby out so I can rinse and repeat it, so I could be out of here by 4 o'clock to get my tea time, and play golf. There's a team of people who are advocating there specifically and only for the birthing parent, and then also the birthing partner, to make sure that, one, the child here makes it safely and as less invasive as possible, and then two, that the mother is also covered and supported not only through the prenatal and delivery process, but also postpartum. After they have their child, they're still provided support so that they are, fortified the way they need to be in order to keep the family unit together.
Mm-hmm. And so now, after this circumstance, you find yourself in the place that you are now. And it's crazy, as you were talking, I was thinking about the way that I was going to ask this question, and the way that I was going to ask the question is really contradictory to what I talk about when I use this term. And I was going to say, you find yourself now being a single father. And that's actually the wrong terminology, because, and I talk about this often when I talk to fathers and moms about parenting, and particularly this whole notion of single moms, where the term single mom is a term that denotes marital status, not parenting status. For every single mom, there is a single dad if you're not married. And let me say that again. for every single mom, there is a single dad, but we've given the term single mom a definition that oftentimes means she's not receiving any help from dad, right? It's not the same notion. And I was going to say to you, you find yourself a single dad, but you weren't married. And what that means in the true literal meaning of the term, you've always been a single dad. And she's always been a single mom because it denotes marital status. But in my mind, I retermed it in my head and I said to myself, but now he has become a single parent, right? Mm-hmm. Now you have become a single parent because there is now not another parent to help you be a parent to your children. Talk to me about that transition, now being a father that is now a single parent, having to raise two children, in the middle of having to grieve for your partner, but having to be there for your children, and also transition your younger child and now your next child into a life not knowing and being able to have access to their mom.
Yeah. It's been honest. So there's there's a lot that's going through my mind. I mean, one, especially if you are in a loving relationship, you never think like the idea of your partner not supporting you in this process, or just supporting you through life, not even this process, supporting you through life. It wasn't never an option. And again, Shamani wasn't sick. She wasn't sick. She wasn't, there weren't ailments to where it was like, oh man, she's slowly deteriorating. It was literally here today, gone tomorrow, and that shift, it brought about so much emotion. So the first thing I think about, and I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm just super blessed, and I'm gonna tell you, explain why. Just even though I've had to deal with loss and grief and this tragedy, and in the situation that I've been in, and I'm gonna bring it back to what Ayala said, and being able to sit in the pain and sit in the sadness. After Shamani passed, my family, my community, my children's daycare, like my staff at my school, strangers, like everybody, everybody showed up. Everybody was present. Everybody made sure that I was covered. Thankfully, the shift happened with paternal leave for the New York City Department of Education, which provided me paternal leave for about 2 months after, we had our child. So I was able to be home for those first 2 months and still get paid. But, to your point, I wasn't able to father. I wasn't even able to be with myself fully at those first couple of weeks, first couple of months. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Like, I'm still in shock. And as time is passing, I'm realizing what my new reality is, And during that time, thankfully, Shamani's mother, her sister, her brother, they all ended up, staying at the house with me for about a good 2 months. And, just helping out, and, my family side coming in every once in a while, and, friends coming over and helping out, cleaning up and making sure there's food in the fridge. And I was in my basement. By myself, painting. After Shamani passed, Shawnee and I decided to create an event called Aftershock, and the event was going to happen on December 19th, which is Shamani's birthday. And Shamani passed on September 6th. We ended up having to bury her she passed on October 6th. we ended up having to bury her on October 11th, which is my birthday. And when we had to bury her, it shifted my understanding of what grief, what life is, what community is. I mean, at her funeral, there had to be 500-600 people at least. Like it was capacity, maybe even 1,000. And we were streaming it online. So they were like, I mean, there were thousands of people who were in support of us. And I remember singing, everybody at the funeral singing happy birthday to me. And we had performance, we had poets, we had people come because she was also active. She graduated from LaGuardia. She was a dancer, so like her community in itself were performance art people, dancers, poets, rappers, all types of dope, individuals. So, it was a reflection of her homegoing ceremony. It was just that, it was a celebration, and at that moment, I really realized, like, how much love and support I have, but I didn't realize how potent and powerful that was. So I was able to, again, so fast forward a little bit, I couldn't deal. All I could do was paint. And at that time, I didn't realize how therapeutic and important painting was for me. Before that, again, we had our organization, we had our company. We were doing art and all of that all the time, but when it came down to it and I was stripped to my bare bones, and I connected with painting, and it really allowed me to do a couple of things. It allowed me to be outside of my head mentally. So I wasn't creating toxic thoughts based off of my new reality. It made me hyper focus on something else that was outside of my reality as well. So like I'm concentrating, hyper focus on my brushstroke, right? How I'm blending the paint, what I'm creating, what it's looking like, how it's coming out, and it gave me an opportunity to take this low vibrational dark energy, this navigating the space of this now emotional bandwidth where I'm like this at and was this when had to eventually navigate and learn all the nuances that got me from here to here. And that's what art did. That's what time to reflect and think did for me. And I was able to really process and figure out what my new life was going to be. And it's so important. And we spoke about this earlier that, we don't get a chance to grieve as Black people. We don't get a chance to think, because when I speak to fathers now who've lost their partner, they're like, yo, I got to go back to work next week. And it's just, I lost my finance. I lost, one, I might not have parental leave like you did. And then even outside of my parental leave, I still was able to had to take 6 more months with unpaid, because I just wasn't mentally ready, to be in the everyday roles of life. And I had to then support my children. But there's men who financially lose that other half of their income, don't necessarily have the luxuries that I was afforded, and have to go back to work, so they don't even have a chance to process. And I think that's huge, and even if you wanted to sit and figure out and sit in the sadness, most people just don't have that luxury to do so. And thankfully, like, again, that's why I'm saying, like, I'm just so thankful for my grief and my just thankful for my parents, and my ancestors and my lineage, and my community, because it afforded me luxuries that other men just don't have, other partners just don't have. And that is to really process and figure out what's the importance of grief and navigating these dark places. And I was navigating dark places that I would have never went to if I had to, because I'm always so used to everybody, so used to having the lights turned on and able to see everything around them and what's behind them and what's on the side of them. And then when you're in this dark space and you're moving, you don't know what's next to you. You don't know what's in front of you.
Yeah.
But when that light started coming on, it put me in a whole new environment and gave me thousands and upon thousands of new opportunities, and that's kind of where the ARIAH Foundation got birthed. Not kind of, that's where the ARIAH Foundation got birthed out of. That is where I found my new transition in life.
You're walking right into where we were going. I was going to say, so out of all of that, you walk into this foundation. Talk to me about the foundation and talk to me about the work.
Yeah, so the ARIAH Foundation, it stands for the Advancement of Reproductive Innovation through Artistry and Healing. And the incubus of the foundation was essentially that first Aftershock event. So that first Aftershock event, we had performing art, we had visual art, we had panel discussion, we had dance, we had opening ritual, we had, closing ritual, giving thanks to the ancestors, all of these things that created the Aftershock events of which we do every year now through our foundation. But we sent the invite online, IG, social media, so people can come. A producer got wind of what we were doing. Her name is Paula Izell. She asked if she can come to our event and film, because she wants to do a documentary on maternal health. So we were like, yeah, come by, come film. And she came and she filmed, and she was blown away by what we did and what we created. And, she asked if she could follow our family. And we said yes, and through that process from December 19th, 2019 to about 2021, they followed our family and essentially eventually created the film Aftershock. And the reason why I bring up Aftershock, because it is a manifestation of what the ARIAH Foundation really stands for. We really want to create pathways using art modalities in order to entertain, educate, we call it edutainment, right? And provide spaces where people are, through the arts, are learning about maternal health, maternal mortality, social equity, birth equity, social justice issues, and finding other avenues and ways to bring more people into the fold so that they know what the issues are, they know what they're up against, they know how to support each other through, art in itself, and then also just through the information that we provide because of our art, our different artistic modalities. And that's what we do, that's what the ARIAH Foundation is. So now we do a lot of panel discussions around Aftershock and, what we're doing present day, the importance of Aftershock, the importance of, and how it resonates with specific communities all around this country. And we also have a program called the Postpartum Awareness Week. Postpartum Awareness Week, we're actually enacting it May 7th to 13th. This will be the first one that we're doing. And it's a 6-day virtual series that we're talking about all things postpartum, and how it affects the mother, the child, the father, the family, the community, and all that encompasses that. We also have an event called Speak, Move, Change. Speak, Move, Change was started by 3 grandmothers who have lost their partners, and Shamony be included in that, and providing information to the community about how to speak up about these issues, how to move and activate themselves around these social justice issues, and what happens when you move and activate, and how you can change the structures and dynamics of which we live in today. I have a group called the Luxor Collective. The Luxor Collective is a men's group that gets together every other week on Thursdays, and we talk about all things that men essentially have to deal with. The group was started the group was started because I wanted to provide a space for men who suffered loss the same way that I did. But what I quickly found out was that, the group needed to be for men who are just dealing with traumas and just being Black in America and all the things that come with that. So, we talk about different topics every other week, but essentially it is made to recreate what brotherhood looks like, recreate what fatherhood looks like, and really start activating our minds collectively so that we can be powerful as we can be as individuals. The Luxor Collective was named after the Luxor Temple, which is a temple in Egypt. And if we know about the temples and the pyramids and just, mathematics and Africa in itself, it is the birthplace of mathematics. And all the temples, people still don't know how they were made, how they created. They are geometrically, mathematically sound. Everything is perfect. But with the Luxor Collective, with the Luxor Temple, the corridors are at an angle. The floors are, not up to mathematic perfection. There's lines, shapes, angles that are just off. But if you look at it at a micro level, but on the macro level, if we look at the entire temple in itself, it represents a man in motion. And, that's essentially what the Luxor Collective is. It is all of us as individuals with all our imperfections, all our griefs, all our traumas, all our heavy things, all the great things also that we have to, live with as individuals. When we get together, we are men moving in one accord, in motion, and it creates a perfect structure. And lastly, I even want to say last because there's a couple other things that we're doing, but I'm working on writing a children's book as well. What we want to do with the ARIAH Foundation is be able to provide information about these social justice issues from, toddler to, elder. And we want to make sure we're covering all the gamuts between that. So with my children's book, it is essentially how we create and recreate our relationships with people who've passed away, who were in our lives, and how we can use our altars as a conduit for communication with them, and then use all the life lessons that they've taught us while they were here to help us navigate on this earth plane in present time. So it's a story of my children and myself just navigating life on a day-to-day basis, but how we always reflect on the messages that their mother, my life partner, gave us, and how we use those messages every day to just be, and navigate this world and still co-create a relationship with each other and co-parent essentially, but I'm just here earthside and she's co-parenting, helping me, on the ancestral plane.
Nice. I don't think we mentioned your children's names. I want to invoke their names into the spirit. So I need you to what are their names?
Most definitely. My son's name is Kari now Kojo. And my daughter's name is Anari Naja Abina.
Nice. Okay. Listen, man, God bless you, bro. I am proud of you, man. This is you represent Black men in a way that we need to elevate these stories and these conversations so that people really know who we are, right? I don't think people know who we are. And so everything you touch, man, is blessed and will be blessed. And so just keep touching, keep touching. Let people know how they could get in touch with you, how they could possibly see the documentary, because I haven't seen it. I want to see it. And so I need to get my hands on seeing it. I actually have this idea, bro. Fathers Incorporated celebrates our 20th anniversary in 2024. So I got this idea for all of these kind of things I want to do in 2024 that I haven't done before. And one of the things I want to do is a fatherhood film festival and here in Atlanta. and I want to do it really big. And I want to bring, there's several brothers such as yourself that I know that have done powerful, powerful documentaries that have not been given the exposure for the subject matter that they should have. And I'm like, my goal is to, and I don't know how this is going to happen, is to get to Tyler Perry to see if I can get him to sponsor a fatherhood film festival in Atlanta and bring films with deep, deep subject matter and create somewhat of a hybrid film festival conference, right, around social justice issues and issues as it relates to family and parenting and fatherhood and relationships and Black men and Black women, but having this anchor of fatherhood be the theme to everything that we're talking about. So you will be hearing from me about that. I have to pull you in on that conversation so that we can make that happen. But tell people how they can get in touch with you and how they could possibly see the documentary.
Most definitely. So the documentary is, everybody's got full access for it. If you have Hulu, you can watch the documentary. The documentary is on Hulu. It's streaming on Hulu. It's been on Hulu since, I want to say July of last year. So just type in Aftershock, it'll come up. You know, it's and it's an awesome piece of art. It's an awesome piece of art. We were nominated for the best documentary for Sundance in 2022. And not nominated, actually, we won. Excuse me. You got to rephrase that. We
That's
won
right.
the best.
That's right.
We won the best documentary for Sundance in 2022, and we also are nominated for a Peabody Award this year. So, got our fingers crossed that we'll be able to be one of those winners. But find it on Hulu. You can find me on Instagram. My personal Instagram is M_U_Z. That's Muzz. My foundation's Instagram is the ARIAH Foundation. You can also go to our website, which is also theariahfoundation.org, and check us out. We're out here. We're doing the work. We're always present and always willing to come to your city and share our share what we're doing as an organization to help eradicate maternal health, maternal morbidity.
Yeah, Omari, thank you so much, man. We are now connected in spirit and by work and by passion and by calling. And I'm sure we'll impact and change the world in a way that people won't be able to measure. And so thank you so much for, being in my environment, being in my circle, and being in my spirit. I'm going to carry your story and you with me everywhere I go. And so we also want to thank all of our I Am Dad podcast listeners. Continue to just, support all of the guests that we have on this show, and more specifically, put the work in. Call a brother, email a brother. How can I help? What can I do? How can I share my story with you? How can we elevate this conversation? What can we do to really help uplift and empower our families for the sake of the well-being of our children? Like, what can we do? And it starts with very small things. And so it doesn't have to be big, big, big. What can I do? Write a blog, send you $5. Can I come to your event? Can I elevate your stuff and amplify your stuff on social media? Do something, right? Just don't, ooh-ah. I hate those kind of people. It's like, I don't need your ooh-ah. Ooh-ahs do nothing for me. Like, I need something tangible. It's nice that you say ooh-ah, don't get me wrong, but that can't be the sum total of how you contribute to and support people in their efforts. So thank you, I Am Dad podcast listeners, for all you do and all you engage in as a result of the people that you hear on this podcast. Until next Sunday, God bless you and have a absolutely tremendously blessed week. See you then. Take care.
Have a good one.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.